Every kitchen in the developed world is pouring one of the most chemically active, microbially rich plant treatments straight down the drain, multiple times a day. It's the water you wash your rice in. For thousands of years, farmers across southern China, Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia returned this rinse water to their rice paddies and household gardens. The knowledge passed from grandmother to grandchild across generations because it simply worked. Modern peer-reviewed research now confirms its power. A 2021 study published in Sustainability by Nabai and colleagues showed that properly fermented washed rice water dramatically boosts beneficial bacteria, including nitrogen fixers, phosphorus and potassium solubilizers, and organisms that produce natural plant growth hormones at levels matching expensive commercial products. A 2022 follow-up study in agronomy confirmed measurable improvements in soil chemistry and crop growth across multiple cycles. But in the early 20th century, synthetic fertilizers and chemically processed rice changed everything. What ancient farmers treasured became something to throw away. The knowledge was never truly lost. However, when misused, the same liquid that fed entire civilizations can become a plant killer. These are the 6 critical mistakes that turn this ancient amendment into the very damage it was supposed to prevent. Mistake 1. Foul-smelling rice water. The pathogen problem. The principle that makes rice washing water valuable is the same principle that can make it dangerous. Rice water is biologically active. It is alive. The microbial populations present in fresh rinse water, and the additional populations that develop during proper fermentation, are precisely what deliver nutrients to plant roots, fix nitrogen from the surrounding air, solubilize phosphorus locked in soil, and produce hormones that stimulate root development. But biology cuts both ways. When rice water sits too long in the wrong conditions or becomes contaminated, the same starch and carbohydrate-rich environment that nourishes beneficial bacteria becomes a feast for pathogens. The signal is unmistakable. A clean sour smell, similar to yogurt or sourdough starter, indicates active beneficial fermentation. A foul, putrid, or rotten odor indicates that pathogenic bacteria or fungi have taken control of the culture. Research published in 2021 by Nabai and colleagues in the journal Sustainability documented that controlled, 3-day fermentation of washed rice water dramatically increases beneficial microbial populations and nutrient concentrations. A companion review published the same year in the Botanica Journal of Science and Technology emphasized that fermentation must be controlled. Under uncontrolled conditions, undesirable microorganisms outcompete the beneficial populations, and the water you intended as fertilizer becomes an inoculum of plant pathogens. The mechanism of damage is direct. Pathogenic bacteria and fungi introduced through spoiled rice water can colonize plant tissue, especially through small wounds or already stressed root systems. Fungal pathogens, including Rhizoctonia and Pythium, thrive in starch-rich environments. Once established, they cause damping off in seedlings and root rot in mature plants. The amendment becomes the infection vector. Use only fresh rice water within 24 hours of rinsing, or rice water that has been properly fermented for 2 to 3 days at room temperature in a covered but breathable container. Smell the water before applying. If the odor is mildly sour and bread-like, it is ready. If the odor is foul, rotten, or sulfurous, discard it. The plants you protect will outnumber the fertilizer you lose. Mistake 2. Daily watering. The organic overload. Every grower who discovers rice water tends to make the same mistake. The first applications produce visible improvement. Leaves greener within days. New growth stronger. Roots more vigorous. The temptation is to apply it every day, on every watering, on every plant. The reasoning seems obvious. If a little works, more must work better. The reasoning is wrong. Rice water is not water. It is a concentrated organic and microbial amendment, and like every concentrated amendment, it operates inside a window of effective dose. Below the window, the effect is small. Inside the window, the effect is significant. Above the window, the effect becomes harmful. The mechanism of harm is biological saturation. Soil is an ecosystem with a finite capacity to process organic input. When fresh starch, sugars, and microbial populations arrive faster than the existing soil community can integrate them, several things happen at once. Decomposition consumes oxygen at the root zone, creating temporary anaerobic conditions where roots suffocate. Excess organic matter triggers explosive growth in opportunistic microbes, some of which compete directly with plant roots for nitrogen, and the nutrient cycling system loses its rhythm, swinging between flushes of availability and periods of starvation. A 2022 study published in Agronomy by Nabai and colleagues tracked consecutive applications of washed rice water across 3 planting cycles. The research documented improved soil properties under controlled application rates, but also confirmed that higher nitrogen leaching occurred when rice water was applied at intensive frequencies, indicating that organic input above the soil's processing capacity escapes the system rather than feeding plants. The study described carryover effects from previous applications that demanded careful management of subsequent doses. Apply rice water once every 7 to 14 days during active growing seasons. Reduce frequency further during dormancy or when plants are stressed by transplant, heat, or pest pressure. Treat it as a periodic supplement rather than a daily watering substitute. Plant biology has a metabolic ceiling. Your job is to feed steadily, not to drown the system in food. Mistake 3. Chemically treated rice. The dead inoculant. Rice water works because of what it carries. The grain releases water-soluble proteins, vitamins, minerals, and surface microbial populations into the rinse. The biological community on the grain seeds the water with the organisms that will fix nitrogen, solubilize phosphorus, and produce growth hormones during fermentation. Take away those organisms, and you have transparent starch water with no biological function. Most commercial rice in modern supermarkets has been processed through systems designed to do exactly that. Pre-harvest pesticides applied to rice paddies persist on the grain. Post-harvest fumigation eliminates storage pests and also eliminates the surface microbial community. Bleaching agents used to standardize the appearance of milled rice destroy proteins and damage the grain's biological envelope. Some rice is coated with talc, mineral oil, or preservatives to extend shelf life and improve appearance. Every one of these treatments interferes with the biology that makes rice water valuable. A 2024 study by Chen and colleagues published in the journal Molecular Soil Biology documented that long-term application of common rice pesticides, including chlorpyrifos, significantly reduces beneficial soil microbe populations, particularly the nitrogen fixers, nitrifiers, and denitrifiers responsible for nutrient cycling. The residues persist in the grain. When that grain is rinsed, the residues enter the rinse water and then enter your soil. The chemical residue that suppressed microbial life in the rice paddy continues to suppress microbial life in your garden. The contrast with organic rice is direct. Organic production does not use the synthetic pesticides, fumigants, or chemical coatings that destroy surface biology. The grain arrives carrying intact microbial populations and uncontaminated starch and protein content. The rinse water from organic rice produces precisely the fermentation profile that the Nabai studies documented as beneficial. Source organic rice whenever possible for your rinse water program. Wash the grain in the proportions documented in the research, approximately 1 part rice to 3 parts water for about 90 seconds. Use that first rinse water for your plants. The grain you cook becomes food for your household. The water that washed it becomes food for your soil. Nothing is wasted. Mistake 4. Application during humid conditions. The fungal trigger. Every amendment has a context where it works and a context where it harms. Rice water carries a high organic and starch content into the soil. In dry to moderately moist conditions, that organic matter is processed by aerobic soil biology at a manageable rate. In already saturated conditions, especially during rainy seasons or under shade cloth where soil stays wet for days at a time, the same organic load becomes the trigger for explosive fungal growth. The mechanism is environmental. Fungal pathogens, including Rhizoctonia, Pythium, and Fusarium species, require 3 conditions for outbreak: available organic substrate, sustained moisture, and reduced air circulation. Applying rice water during humid conditions supplies the first condition at exactly the moment the second and third are already present. The result is fungal infection rates that would not have occurred from either the humidity or the rice water in isolation. The Nabai research consistently emphasized that washed rice water performs best under controlled application conditions. The organic load is a feature when soil biology can process it aerobically. It becomes a liability when anaerobic conditions develop. Horticulture extension publications across multiple universities have documented similar patterns with other organic amendments. Starch-rich and sugar-rich liquids applied during sustained wet weather correlate with elevated fungal disease incidence across crop types. The practical consequence for growers in humid climates or during rainy seasons is clear. Pause rice water applications when forecasts call for sustained rain. Avoid applications under shade structures, where soil dries slowly. Treat the amendment as a supplement to active aerobic growing conditions, not a treatment for already stressed environments. If your soil surface is consistently wet to the touch and your foliage is showing any signs of fungal pressure, withhold rice water entirely until conditions clear. The biology that makes this amendment valuable depends on a partnership with aerobic soil organisms. When the soil cannot breathe, the amendment cannot perform. Wait for dry weather. Wait for the soil to return to optimal moisture, then apply at the doses and intervals documented in the research. The same liquid that triggers fungal outbreaks in wet conditions builds soil fertility in optimal ones. Mistake 5. Waterlogging. The root rot pathway. The previous mistake addressed environmental humidity. This one addresses what happens during the application itself. Many growers, knowing that rice water carries nutrients, treat the application as a deep watering. They saturate the soil. They flood the root zone. They reason that more water means more uptake. The reasoning produces dead plants. Saturation has nothing to do with uptake. Roots cannot absorb nutrients in oxygen-deprived soil. When pore spaces in the root zone fill completely with water, the oxygen that root cells require for metabolism becomes unavailable. Within hours, root tip cells begin to die. Within days, the root system loses its absorbing capacity and becomes vulnerable to opportunistic fungal pathogens, particularly Pythium and Phytophthora, that thrive precisely in saturated soil. The condition is root rot. It is one of the most common killers of houseplants and garden crops, and adding rice water to already wet soil accelerates rather than prevents it. The compounding factor with rice water specifically is the starch content. The starch dissolved in the rinse water becomes food for anaerobic bacteria in waterlogged soil. The The microbial communities that develop under these conditions produce metabolic byproducts, including hydrogen sulfide and organic acids that further damage root tissue. The same organic content that makes rice water valuable in well-aerated soil becomes toxic in saturated soil. The amendment that should nourish becomes the substrate for plant death. The Nabai consecutive application studies in agronomy documented increased nitrogen leaching at intensive application rates, indicating that rice water applied beyond soil capacity escapes downward through the profile rather than feeding plants. The pattern is consistent across the research. Effective application respects the soil's ability to integrate the input. Excessive application overwhelms the system and produces outcomes opposite to the intended effect. Apply rice water in measured doses appropriate to the container or bed size. For potted plants, apply enough to moisten the soil without producing runoff from drainage holes. For garden beds, apply at rates comparable to a light to moderate watering, not a flood. Allow the soil to return to moderate moisture between applications. The plants you grow respond to rhythm, not to volume. Mistake 6. Late rinses. The empty water. The final mistake comes from the same temptation that produces the second mistake. If a little works, more must work better. So growers save the second rinse, then the third, then the fourth, building up jugs of cloudy water and applying every drop to their gardens. They reason that since each rinse came from rice, each rinse must carry the same value as the first. The reasoning ignores how the rinse process actually works. The water-soluble compounds in rice, including proteins, vitamins, minerals, and surface starch, dissolve into the first wash water at high concentration. By the second wash, concentration drops sharply. By the third and fourth washes, the water leaves the rice nearly transparent. The grain has nothing more to release. The water in your container is essentially water. Classic rice chemistry research, summarized in the work of Giuliano in 1985 and 1993, cited extensively across the modern Nabai studies, documented that rice washing removes between 7 and 70% of water-soluble nutrients in the first wash, depending on rice variety and processing. Phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and most of the available B vitamins exit the grain in that initial rinse. Subsequent rinses recover only trace amounts. The Nabai research protocols specifically used first rinse water at a 1 part rice to 3 parts water ratio, washed for approximately 90 seconds, because that is the rinse that contains the nutrient profile the research validated. The implication is straightforward. The third, fourth, and later rinses are not harmful to your plants. They are simply not the amendment. Applying them gives you no meaningful biological or nutritional benefit beyond what plain water would provide. The effort of saving and applying them is effort wasted, and the assumption that they carry value can mislead growers into thinking the amendment is failing, when in fact they have never actually used the amendment at all. Use only the first and second rinses from your rice washing. Discard or repurpose the later rinses as plain water for non-plant uses. Apply the concentrated early rinses according to the dose and frequency guidelines documented in the previous 5 mistakes. The amendment in the first rinse is what built rice paddies across Asia for thousands of years. The water from the fourth rinse never grew anything. But it survived. The knowledge of how to use rice water never disappeared into corporate archives or regulatory vaults. While synthetic fertilizer manufacturers consolidated into a global market worth over $200 billion annually, the practice of returning rice rinse water to soil persisted in millions of household gardens across Asia, the Pacific, and increasingly across the world as the diaspora carried the knowledge with it. Research at University Putra, Malaysia, documented the chemistry and biology of washed rice water through the Nabai research program, publishing in Sustainability, Botanica Journal of Science and Technology, and Agronomy between 2021 and 2022. Researchers across Asia confirmed the impact of pesticide residues on soil biology, including the Chen and colleagues' 2024 study in molecular soil biology. University extension publications across multiple agricultural colleges documented the parallel patterns between traditional Asian amendment practices and modern microbiology. The knowledge that ancient Asian farmers carried in their kitchens is now also carried in peer-reviewed journals indexed across the global scientific literature. Farmers in rice-growing regions never stopped using it. Grandmothers in Japan still pour the rinse water onto kitchen gardens. Farmers in Vietnam and the Philippines still return it to vegetable plots. The Indonesian Lari tradition of fermenting rice water for garden use predates the entire synthetic fertilizer industry by centuries and continues without interruption. The practice survived because the results survived. The plants knew. Today, the practice is accelerating outside Asia as well. Home growers, frustrated by expensive products that produce diminishing returns, started asking why the simplest amendment in their kitchen was the one they had been taught to throw away. The research answered the question. The kitchen had been right all along. The silence around this amendment is breaking. You can grow what they taught you to drain. Start tomorrow morning. Buy a small bag of organic rice. Wash 1 cup of grain in 3 cups of water for 90 seconds. Pour the cloudy first rinse into a clean jar. Use it within 24 hours on your plants, applied at moderate moisture conditions, in measured doses, no more frequently than once every 7 to 14 days. If you want to develop the fermented version, cover the jar with breathable cloth, leave it at room temperature for 2 to 3 days, and check the smell before applying. Sour and bread-like is correct. Foul and rotten is not. The total cost of this amendment program for a household garden across an entire growing season is essentially the price of the rice you were already going to cook. A few dollars, possibly zero if the rice was already in your pantry. Compare that to the bottles of liquid fertilizer, root stimulator, and microbial inoculant marketed for the same effect. The $200 billion synthetic fertilizer industry profits from the assumption that you need to buy what your kitchen already produces. These 6 corrections break that assumption permanently. If this seed was finally freed for you, subscribe to Hank's gardening journey and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps break the silence. The next seed breaks free soon.